has a bad reputation, and it's probably very well deserved because he betrayed Jesus. He turned on Jesus. Judas is it's kind of an interesting study if you look about it. You know, he was with Jesus for 3 years, just like Peter, just like the other apostles, John, Andrew, all the apostles. And Judas stayed with him. Judas saw with his own eyes lame people walk, blind people see. He witnessed or was near dead people that came to life. Over and over and over, Judas was there. Judas heard the most intimate conversations from the Son of God himself. He was part of the inner circle. But we found out, they didn't know at the time, but we were told, Judas had not bought in. Judas was the keeper of the money box. You remember the story when the lady comes in and breaks the perfume and pours it on Jesus' feet. And Judas is all upset. Wow, why didn't you take that money and sell it? Sell the perfume and take the money and we could give it to the poor. Judas he wasn't a generous guy. Judas kept the money box, and the Bible tells us that he was skimming off the top. So the whole time, do you find it unusual that one of the 12 that Jesus chose to be his most intimate friends, the ones that were in the inner circle, one of those was not on board. One of them was secretly and even actively working against him. What was the deal? Was he just not paying attention? Did old Judas pull one over on him? Of course not. And then it was after, we know the story. Judas was the one that sold him out, that betrayed him. Now, there's all kinds of theories on why he did that. We don't know why. We just know he did it. He sold him out for 30 pieces of silver because he was never on board with him anyway. And then we read how he ended up realizing the mistake that he had made, went back and got rid of the silver, didn't even want it, wasn't important anymore. And he went out and he took his own life. He hung himself. And the Bible's even more descriptive. It goes on to tell what a pitiful end he had, even in death. I heard somebody say that probably the reason that, he fell out into the field and his body burst open. And the dogs would come and eat it. Nobody had anything to do with him. That's the end that he had. Now, how do you go from walking every day for 3 years with the Son of God to that's your end? Your body bursts open in a field and nobody cares? You take your own life and nobody has anything to say about it? How do you go from one sitting at the feet of Jesus to this brutal and useless and horrible death? Now, the other apostles, some of them suffered terrible deaths. But it was honorable because they were doing it for Christ and they'll be rewarded for that greatly. But his was just a waste. How can that be? The problem was not what Judas did. The problem was what Judas did not do. First of all, he did not take advantage of the opportunity that he had to walk daily with the Son of God. He wasted it. He wasted the opportunity. But more importantly, he did not return to God. We don't see that in the Scripture where he came back. Jesus would have forgiven him, don't you think? He could have gone to Jesus even after the arrest, even as he's walking to the hill to be crucified. Judas could have come out of the shadows, walked up to him and said, "I'm sorry for what I've done." And what do you think? How would the story have read? Wouldn't it have been a neat story? Jesus, on his way to the cross, would have forgiven him. That's just the nature of who he is. But instead, his life ended in a pile of filth. What a waste. What a waste of a life. What a waste of a reputation. I mean, it's 2,000 years later, and everybody, people don't even know the Bible. They know Judas. And it's a derogatory term, isn't it? You call somebody a Judas, you know what that means. That's what he's associated with. It could have ended so differently for him. Even after the failure, it could have ended differently for Judas. Judas could have gone on and been one of the ones standing next to Peter at Pentecost. He could have been one of the ones saying, look at me. Look at me. I was the worst of the worst, and look what Jesus did for me. But he wasted it. He wasted his life, his potential. Poured it out on the ground. Don't waste the opportunity that you have. I'm sorry to say that there are those in this room who don't take seriously the advantages that they have of being in a Christian school. You blow it off. You constantly fight against, the authority. You constantly, it's every opportunity you can get to swim upstream. You know what I mean? And when you get outside, then it's like, you're desperate to find some way to rebel. Some way. Your language is not indicative of what the expectation is for a Christian. Your attitude, the way you treat your parents, your honesty in class. I don't really understand how that can be, but I don't understand Judas's situation either. You have an opportunity to walk daily in a Christian environment. Now, in one sense, Jesus is not here, but in another sense, he absolutely is. And most of you will go on and your life will stand for something. But I pray that there's none of you who will waste it, who will end up, who will graduate from here and go on and end up in a situation where you have wasted your opportunities. But that can happen. If it can happen to Jesus, it can certainly happen to us. And what you got to be careful of, if that happens, you better be careful that it's not you. You better be careful that you draw those lines where they need to be, and make sure your associations are with the ones who are buying in, because that's the only way to have a good life, to have a productive life. For whatever reason, Jesus allowed Judas to continue with him. I don't know why. Maybe it was for the greater lesson that, you know what? In a group, there's always going to be some that don't buy in. There's some parables like that, the wheat and the tares, whatever. But the challenge is not for the other guy. The challenge is for you. Where do you stand? What are you making out of your life? You. Not the guy next to you. Not your best friend. Not your dad. Not your brother. You. Where do you stand? And you better make the decision.